You are not trapped in your emotions. You are not trapped in your thoughts. You are not even trapped in your past. You are trapped in a role that looks like freedom. The role of the observer. You learn to step back. You learn to watch instead of react. You learn to notice what moves inside you without being pulled into it. And everyone told you this was the peak. Awareness, consciousness, the highest ground, but something does not feel finished. Because even now, life does not fully move. It pauses, it hesitates, it waits for permission. You are calm, but not deeply at ease. Clear, but not fully open. Present, yet slightly removed. This is the part almost no one talks about. You are no longer inside the storm, but you are standing just outside it, watching, monitoring, keeping distance. That distance feels intelligent. It feels safe. It feels advanced, but it still feels like distance. You are not lost in emotion anymore, yet you are not merged with life either. You are positioned, and positions require effort. The observer sounds neutral, but it is not empty. It has a center. It has a stance. It has a subtle sense of, I am here and life is there. That separation is quiet, but it is active. You can feel it when you relax and immediately check yourself. You can feel it when silence appears and something stays alert. You can feel it when peace arrives and part of you leans forward to protect it. You are watching yourself be present. That is not freedom. That is supervision. This is why clarity did not dissolve effort. This is why understanding did not bring rest. This is why awareness still feels like something you must maintain. The observer was never meant to be a home. It was meant to be a doorway. Most people never reach it. They live inside impulse and call it identity, inside reaction and call it truth. You stepped out and that mattered, but now you are standing in the doorway and mistaking it for the destination. Here is the illusion. You believe that because you are observing everything, you are at the highest level, but observation itself is something that appears. It appears as a position, as a stance, as a function, which raises a question that most minds avoid. If you are observing your thoughts and observing your emotions and observing your reactions, then what is observing the observer? This is not a philosophical trick. It is a lived tension, because the observer can see almost everything except what it is standing on. It can watch the mind, but it cannot see the ground from which watching happens. So it holds on, it stays active, it stays alert. It believes if it lets go, chaos will return. But the opposite is true. The observer prevents collapse, but it also prevents surrender. As long as someone is watching life, life is slightly restrained, filtered, managed. You may not feel this as stress. You feel it as effort without struggle, a constant inner readiness, a subtle bracing. This is why even joy feels slightly observed, why peace feels temporary, why silence feels like something you are inside, not something you are part of. You are doing awareness correctly. That is the problem. You have mastered the skill of stepping back, but you have not yet stepped beyond the one who steps back. The observer feels like the final authority, but it is still a function inside something larger, something that does not stand anywhere, something that does not monitor, something that does not need to watch in order to know. This is the edge, not an edge of belief, not an edge of spirituality, an edge of control, because beyond the observer, there is no position to hold, no stance to maintain, no role to perform. There is only knowing without distance, and the observer cannot go there, because going there would mean disappearing, not dying, not breaking, becoming unnecessary. That is why this truth is rarely named. It offers no badge, no identity, no role of being conscious. It removes the last place where the self feels useful, so the mind avoids it. It stays busy watching, but if something in you feels a quiet pull here, pay attention. Not to the words, but to the pause behind them, because you have already sensed moments where awareness dropped its posture, moments where action happened without commentary, moments where clarity moved without supervision. Those moments were not accidents. They were glimpses of a level where life does not need to be watched to unfold correctly. If you are observing everything, the real question is not what you are seeing. The real question is this: what is seeing you, this state intimately? You are no longer drowning in emotion. You are no longer lost inside thought. You notice reactions as they form. You see patterns before they take over. From the outside, this looks like mastery. From the inside, it feels like maintenance. You wake up aware, not peacefully aware, alertly aware. Your attention turns inward almost automatically. You scan your state. You check your tone. You notice how you feel about how you feel. Nothing dramatic happens anymore, but nothing fully releases either. You move through your day with composure. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of explode. Yet the pause has weight. It is not exhaustion. It is not confusion. It is not chaos. It is effort without struggle. You are not being dragged by life, but you are not being carried either. You stand watching, holding yourself steady. You notice it most when things are quiet, when there is nothing urgent to solve, nothing emotional to process. In those moments, something inside you does not settle. It stays slightly engaged, as if waiting for the next thing to manage. You call this awareness. You call it being conscious. You call it staying present. But your body feels the truth before your mind does. Presence that requires monitoring is not rest. You have learned how to stay above reaction, but you have not learned how to be supported. So you carry yourself all the time. You analyze your inner movements with precision. You understand why you feel what you feel. You can trace patterns back to their roots. Yet understanding has not lightened the load. You see fear arise. You recognize it. You do not act on it. Still, your chest tightens. Still, your breath shortens. Still, something braces. This confuses you because you are doing everything right. You are aware. You are responsible. You are regulated. So why are you tired? Not physically tired, existentially tired. Tired of always being the one who knows, the one who notices, the one who stays conscious when others collapse. You rarely say this out loud because it sounds like failure or arrogance or ingratitude, but sometimes you wish you could stop watching yourself for a moment. You miss moving without commentary. You miss acting without inner supervision. You miss moments where life simply happens through you. You might even feel a quiet envy toward people who seem unburdened, not because they are unconscious, but because they appear carried by something you cannot access. They rest into life. You stand above it. You are not being pulled around anymore, but you are holding yourself upright every second. This is the missing piece. You are stable, but you are not supported. You are calm, but you are not held. There is no collapse in your system, but there is also no surrender. You have learned how to not fall, but you have not learned how to lean. This is where the absence appears, not the absence of belief, not the absence of meaning, the absence of something underneath you, something that could carry weight, something that could take over when you stop managing. Instead, you remain on watch. You listen to your thoughts, but you are also listening to the listening. You are aware of awareness, and awareness has become work. You may sit in silence and notice thoughts pass. And even there, something remains upright, as if silence itself must be supervised. You are not inside the storm anymore, but you are standing guard at its edge. This is why peace does not feel permanent. This is why ease feels conditional. This is why even joy has a slight distance. You experience life, but you do not fully trust it. So you stay ready to intervene, ready to regulate, ready to step back if things move too fast. This readiness is subtle, but it never turns off, and readiness is not rest. You have become very good at not needing help, at not falling apart, at not relying on anything beyond your own awareness. This is praised. This is encouraged. This is called strength. But strength without support becomes strain. You are no longer being dragged by forces outside you, but you are still pushing from inside. You are not asleep, but you are not letting yourself be held awake by something larger. So life feels like something you manage, not something that carries you. This is why decisions feel heavy, even when they are clear. Why movement feels intentional but not fluid. Why silence feels controlled instead of alive. You have removed chaos, but you have also removed trust. Not trust in ideas, trust in intelligence beyond your control. The kind of intelligence that does not need to be watched to function. The kind that organizes without supervision. You do not name it. You do not pray to it. You do not believe in it. You simply do not allow it. Because allowing it would mean stepping down from the role of watcher, and that feels unsafe. So you stay upright, aware, responsible, but something in you knows this is not the end. The tiredness you feel is not burnout. It is not disillusionment. It is the fatigue of carrying a role that was never meant to be permanent. You are not being called back into unconsciousness. You are being called into support. Not support from people, not support from ideas. Support from the ground of intelligence that has always been there. Quiet, unclaimed, unmanaged. The fact that you feel the absence means you are close. You are not failing at awareness. You are outgrowing it as a position. You are no longer being swept away, but you are also no longer being carried. And that tension you feel, that quiet effort, you cannot name. It is not a problem. It is the signal that you are ready to stop holding yourself up, not by collapsing, but by allowing something deeper to take the weight. The observer feels like the highest point because it stands apart from everything else. It watches thoughts arise. It notices emotions move. It sees reactions before they take control. From there, it looks complete. But look closer. The observer is not empty. It has a location. It has a stance. It has a subtle sense of being someone who is watching. That alone tells you something important. Anything that can be noticed is not the source. Anything that can be held in awareness is not the ground of awareness. The observer can be seen. That is the quiet reveal. The observer feels invisible only because it is subtle, but it is still an experience. A position consciousness takes. There is a sense of I am watching, a sense of distance, a sense of standing just behind life. That sense is refined, but it is not ultimate, because even that sense appears. You can notice when the observer tightens, when it becomes vigilant, when it leans forward to stay in control. You can notice when it relaxes slightly, when attention softens, when watching becomes lighter. If the observer can change, then it is not the foundation. This is where the structure quietly breaks. The observer was never the end. It was the last layer the mind could stand on. It still belongs to movement, to function, to effort. It is a role consciousness plays to create safety, and roles require energy. As long as there is an observer, there is a center. As long as there is a center, there is a boundary. As long as there is a boundary, there is separation. The observer divides experience into two. The one who sees and what is seen. This division is subtle, but it shapes everything, because life is no longer simply happening. It is being monitored. This is why awareness feels active, why presence feels maintained, why silence still carries tension. The observer is doing its job, but there is something deeper that never needed a job in the first place, because before the observer appears, something is already present. Before thought, before reaction, before watching, there is a knowing that does not look from anywhere, a field that does not stand behind the eyes, a presence that does not lean forward or pull back. It does not observe. It does not track. It does not supervise. It simply is. This is what can be called the field of knowing, or pure presence. And yes, this is what many people mean when they say God. Not a figure, not a voice, not a being watching from above, but the ground in which all watching happens. God, not as someone who sees you, but as that by which seeing itself is possible. This is the turning point, because when God is understood as a character, belief is required. But when God is understood as the source of awareness, recognition is enough. You do not need faith to notice presence. You are already inside it. You do not need to reach it. You cannot step outside it. The observer appears inside this field. Just like thoughts appear, just like emotions appear, the observer feels closer to you than thought. So it feels like you, but closeness does not mean identity. The observer is still something happening. Presence is not happening. It is what allows happening to occur. This is why it has no position, no angle, no distance. You cannot stand in it. You cannot watch from it. You can only be it. And being it requires nothing. This is where control quietly dissolves, because control belongs to positions, to roles, to centers that manage. Presence does not manage. It allows, not passively, but intelligently. This intelligence does not think. It does not analyze. It does not interfere. Yet it organizes everything. Breath moves, heart beats, decisions form, words come out of your mouth, all without an observer directing them. This has always been happening, even before you became conscious of consciousness. The observer did not create intelligence. It only noticed it. So when you hold the observer as the highest level, you unknowingly block this deeper intelligence from being trusted. You keep supervision where surrender is needed. This is why awareness can feel dry. Why clarity can feel effortful. Why life can feel controlled but not alive. You are still standing between life and its source. The moment this is seen, something relaxes. Not because you do anything, but because doing is no longer required. The observer does not need to be destroyed. It does not need to be rejected. It simply needs to be seen for what it is. A tool, not a throne. When the observer is recognized as an appearance, it stops pretending to be the owner of awareness. And when that happens, presence reveals itself naturally, not as an experience, but as what has been here the whole time. This is why no effort can bring you there. Effort belongs to the observer. Presence is already carrying the effort. This is also why the mind resists this reveal, because the observer loses its authority here. It cannot claim credit. It cannot take control. It cannot stand out. There is no role left. Only life knowing itself directly. This is what surrender actually means. Not submission, not weakness, but the end of standing apart. When people speak of God in this context, they are pointing to this, not a ruler in the sky, but the intelligence that does not need watching, not something you believe in, but something you stop blocking. God is not above you. God is what awareness rests in when it stops holding itself up. This is why the deepest peace does not feel like calm. It feels like being supported. This is why action becomes clean, why decisions become simple, why silence becomes alive. Not because you are doing less, but because something deeper is finally allowed to do what it always did. The observer was a necessary step, but it was never the final one. The final step is not upward, it is downward, into the ground of knowing that never needed a step at all. And once this is seen, it cannot be unseen, because you are no longer trying to watch life. Life is knowing itself through you. The observer feels safe. That is why you stay there. It gives you distance from pain. It gives you clarity when emotions rise. It gives you the sense that nothing will overwhelm you again. You are no longer at the mercy of impulse. You are no longer swallowed by fear. You are no longer blind inside your own reactions. From this position, you feel awake, responsible, correct. And this is exactly why it becomes a trap, because safety can quietly replace trust. The observer protects you from chaos, but it also protects you from surrender. It creates a space where nothing surprises you, Nothing breaks through. Nothing fully takes you. You see everything coming. You manage everything carefully. And slowly, life loses its weight. Not its meaning, its gravity. You are not falling anymore, but you are not being carried either. The observer gives you the feeling of being right, of being regulated, of being in control. But control always comes with a cost. Control means someone is holding the wheel. Someone is deciding when to allow movement. Someone is filtering what is permitted to enter. That someone is the observer. And the observer does not trust easily. It learned vigilance as survival. It learned distance as protection. It learned awareness as armor. So when the idea of letting go appears, the observer tightens. Not in panic, in logic. It says stay aware, stay upright, stay conscious. Because if you stop watching, something might go wrong. This is where the tension lives. You are not resisting God. You are avoiding vulnerability. Not the vulnerability of emotion, the vulnerability of not being the one in charge. Because surrender is not collapse. It is loss of authority. And the observer was built to preserve authority, even spiritual authority. This is the subtle truth few want to face. The ego does not die when you become the observer. It refines itself. It trades loud identification for quiet superiority. It trades reaction for regulation. It trades chaos for composure. And then it hides inside awareness. It becomes the one who knows, the one who sees, the one who is awake. This ego is harder to detect because it speaks in calm tones, because it carries wisdom, because it appears selfless, but it still holds the center. And as long as there is a center, there is separation. The observer does not oppose God. It postpones God. It says not yet, not fully, not without supervision. It wants to stay present while keeping final authority. This is why surrender feels threatening, because surrender means the observer steps aside, not into ignorance, but into trust. And trust feels unsafe to something built on vigilance. So you hover, you allow some softness, some openness, but never complete release. You let life move, but you stay ready to intervene. This readiness becomes your default state. You are calm, but braced, aware, but guarded, correct, but closed at the deepest level. This is why you feel stuck. Not because you lack insight, but because insight became a shield. You know how to watch pain, but not how to be held through it. You know how to regulate fear, but not how to trust what moves underneath fear. You know how to stay conscious, but not how to let consciousness carry you. The observer offers safety, but safety is not nourishment. It keeps you intact, but it does not let you dissolve. And dissolution is where the deeper shift happens. Not dissolution of life, dissolution of the one who insists on managing life. This is why transformation stalls here, because nothing is wrong enough to force surrender, and nothing is soft enough to invite it. You are too stable to break, and too guarded to yield. So you circle, refining awareness, improving regulation, deepening observation, but never crossing the line where control ends. That line feels like danger to the observer, because beyond it, there is no role, no one to say I am awake, no one to say I am doing this right. There is only being moved, and being moved requires trust, not belief, trust. Trust that intelligence, larger than your awareness, exists. Trust that it does not need supervision. Trust that life does not collapse when you stop watching it. The observer struggles here because it has been praised for staying alert, rewarded for being conscious, validated for being in control. Letting go feels like regression, but it is not. It is a descent into support. The observer fears this because it confuses surrender with passivity. But surrender is not doing nothing. It is letting something else do what it already knows how to do. Your heart beats without observation. Your breath moves without permission. Your body heals without instruction. Intelligence has been operating long before the observer appeared, yet the observer wants credit. It wants to believe awareness is what makes life work. But awareness only notices what already works. This is the moment of tension. Because the observer has done everything it can do, it cannot go further. It cannot surrender itself. It can only be seen, and seeing it clearly exposes the last offense. Not against chaos, against God, not the God of belief, but the God of support, the ground that carries without asking, the intelligence that organizes without control, the presence that does not need permission. The observer hesitates here, because stepping aside feels like losing everything it built. But what it built was never the foundation. It was scaffolding, necessary, temporary, and the moment you sense this, the tension sharpens, because now you know why you are stuck. Not because you are failing, but because you are holding on, holding the role, holding the stance, holding the illusion of final authority. You are not resisting God. You are not denying truth. You are simply not ready to stop being the one who decides. And this is the most honest place you can be, because nothing can move forward until control is seen for what it is. Not strength, not wisdom, but fear disguised as responsibility. The observer does not need to be destroyed. It needs to be relieved. Relieved of the burden of being in charge of life. And until that happens, you will remain safe, clear, correct, and quietly, deeply unfinished. Something shifts the moment control loosens, not outwardly, not dramatically, but internally, in a way that changes how life moves through you. There is no longer someone standing back to observe, no one monitoring the moment, no one managing the flow, and yet nothing falls apart. In fact, things begin to move with greater accuracy. Decisions arise without debate. Words come out clean. Actions land where they need to land, not because you calculated better, but because calculation is no longer leading. This is the breakthrough. When the observer steps aside, something else steps forward. Not a voice, not a command, an intelligence that was always there. Life no longer feels like something you are watching. It feels like something happening through you. There is no gap between impulse and action. No delay caused by inner consultation. No hesitation disguised as mindfulness. Movement becomes direct. This does not feel reckless. It feels precise. You act quickly, but not impulsively. You decide fast, but not blindly. You respond immediately, but without urgency, because response is no longer filtered through fear of error. There is a sense that the right movement is already forming before thought arrives, and thought follows. This is where many misunderstand. They imagine letting go of control leads to passivity, to carelessness, to chaos. But what actually dissolves is interference. The interference of a self trying to manage life from the outside. When that interference ends, intelligence moves freely. You begin to notice that effort drops without productivity decreasing. In fact, things get done more cleanly. There is less friction in simple tasks, less tension in conversation, less weight in decision-making, not because you care less, but because caring is no longer mixed with anxiety. You do not need to prove clarity. You do not need to demonstrate awareness. You simply move. This is one of the clearest signs. The need to show that you are awake disappears. You stop correcting others internally. Stop measuring your reactions. Stop checking if you are doing presence correctly. You are not trying to stay conscious. You are simply conscious without effort. And that difference changes everything. You can sit in silence without monitoring it. You can be in noise without bracing against it. You can face uncertainty without preparing an inner defense. There is no one holding the center. The center dissolves, and what replaces it is not emptiness. It is support, not emotional support, not reassurance. Structural support, as if something underneath experience is now carrying weight. This is why calm deepens. Not the calm of regulation, but the calm of trust. You are not trusting an idea. You are trusting a functioning You see that things organize themselves when you stop interfering. Breath moves when you do not manage it. The body adjusts without instruction. Words arrive without rehearsal. Life knows what it is doing, and that knowing does not come from you. This is the moment where the word God begins to make sense without belief. Not as a figure you think about, but as the intelligence that moves when you stop blocking. God here is not someone you pray to. It is what prays through you when prayer is needed. What acts through you when action is required. What rests through you when rest is right. This is why faith here has no belief attached. Faith without belief means you do not need a story. You do not need certainty. You do not need to convince yourself. You simply stop resisting the intelligence that is already operating. Trust without effort means you are not trusting consciously. Trust is not an act. It is the absence of guarding. You are no longer bracing for life. You are letting life move. And the result is not loss of control. It is alignment. Things fall into place with less noise, with fewer corrections, with minimal friction. You still think, you still plan, you still evaluate, but thinking no longer carries fear. Planning no longer carries tension. Evaluation no longer carries self-protection. All of that drains away because the burden of making everything right is gone. You are not trying to ensure the outcome. You are allowing the process. This creates a strange paradox. You care deeply, but you are not anxious. You are engaged, but not attached. You are responsible, but not controlling. This state feels quieter than awareness, but far more alive. There is a softness in the system, not weakness, availability. You are available to life, and life responds. Opportunities appear without force. Clarity arrives without effort. Connections happen without strategy. This does not mean everything becomes easy. Challenges still arise. Pain still appears. Uncertainty still exists. But your relationship to them is different. You do not step back to observe pain. You move through it without commentary. You do not analyze uncertainty. You allow it to reorganize direction. You do not manage difficulty. You meet it, and meeting is faster than managing. This is why action becomes accurate. Not because you are wiser, but because wisdom is no longer filtered through a self that needs to stay in charge. You trust movement more than thought. You trust silence more than explanation. You trust timing more than planning. Not blindly, naturally. This is not spiritual confidence. It is structural ease. You are no longer holding yourself up. Something else is. And the most striking part is this. You realize it was always happening. Even before awareness, even before observation, life has been functioning through you since the beginning. The observer simply thought it was responsible. When that illusion dissolves, relief arrives. Not excitement, relief. The relief of not having to be the one who makes everything work. This is what it means to allow God to operate. Not to believe, not to submit, but to stop interfering. God is not added to your life here. God is revealed when you stop standing in the way. This is why this state cannot be forced. Any attempt to reach it is interference. Any effort to hold it collapses it. It appears when effort ends, when watching ends, when controlling ends, when guarding ends, and what remains is not a void. It is life moving with intelligence through an open system. You still show up, you still act, you still choose, but you are no longer the source. You are the passage. And from here, everything becomes simpler. Not because life simplifies, but because you are no longer trying to run it. This is the breakthrough. Not an achievement, a permission. Nothing needs to be added here. That is the first thing to understand. No practice, no ritual, no method, because anything you add immediately places you back in control. The mind wants instructions, steps, a sequence to follow. That impulse is the observer trying to stay relevant. But this level is not entered by doing. It is entered by noticing what is already happening. There is only one recognition that matters. You can feel the sense of watching, not watching the world, watching yourself. The subtle stance of I am here and I am paying attention. It feels responsible. It feels upright. It feels correct. And it carries tension. You do not need to remove it. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to drop it. You only need to see it clearly. See the feeling of being the one who is observing. See the posture of attention leaning forward. See the quiet effort of staying aware, and then do nothing with it. Do not step into it. Do not try to dissolve it. Do not comment on it. Just do not enter the role. This is where the misunderstanding usually appears. People think surrender means letting go. Letting go sounds like an action, a decision, a movement. But here, letting go is not something you do. It is something that happens when you stop intervening. You do not drop the observer. You stop stepping into it. You do not release control. You stop asserting it. This is a crucial distinction because the observer is not held by force. It is held by habit. The habit of identifying with the one who watches. When identification stops, effort stops. Not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. You may notice this in very ordinary moments. You are sitting, breathing happens, thoughts move, and instead of watching them carefully, something relaxes, not into distraction, into neutrality. Breathing continues without supervision. Thoughts appear without commentary. Silence no longer feels like something you must maintain. There is no one managing the moment. This is not emptiness. It is fullness without control. You do not feel spaced out. You feel grounded. More here, not less. This is why no technique can lead you here. Any technique strengthens the observer. Any practice reinforces the sense of someone doing something. This recognition weakens that structure. Not by attack, by irrelevance. The observer does not disappear. It simply stops being necessary. This is surrender, not collapse, not passivity, the end of interference. And here is the key sentence. You are not letting go so that something higher can act. You are stopping the habit of blocking what already acts. The intelligence underneath experience has never stopped operating. Your heart beats without awareness. Your body heals without permission. Your intuition moves before thought catches up. Life has been running itself the entire time. The observer only thought it was in charge. Surrender is the moment you stop correcting that process. Not with belief, not with trust as an idea, with non-interference. This is why surrender here does not feel religious. There is no devotion, no pleading, no posture of smallness. It is practical. It feels like stepping out of the way. You do not say, I surrender. You notice that you are no longer holding the reins. And when you stop holding, nothing collapses. Instead, movement becomes smoother. You may feel a moment of uncertainty, not fear, uncertainty, because the observer is used to being the reference point. When it relaxes, there is no immediate replacement, just openness. That openness is often misinterpreted as vulnerability. But vulnerability here is not exposure. It is availability. You are available to what moves next. This is why surrender does not feel weak. Weakness comes from loss of structure. Here, structure remains. What dissolves is tension. You are still capable, still intelligent, still responsive, but you are no longer managing life from above it. You are inside it. This is the anchor, not a state you try to return to, not a feeling you hold, a recognition that whenever effort appears, the observer is active, and whenever effort softens, something deeper is already functioning. You do not need to remember this. It is self-correcting. Every time you notice yourself trying to be aware, you can see the stance. And every time you see the stance without stepping into it, space opens. No ritual required, no belief required, no discipline required. This is not about doing it right. It is about not doing what you have been doing unconsciously. Standing apart, monitoring, supervising. When that stops, surrender happens by itself. And surrender here is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels almost ordinary, like realizing you do not need to hold your breath anymore. You breathe, life moves, You respond, and there is a quiet sense that something is carrying the flow, not guiding from above, not commanding from outside, operating from within everything. You do not call it God here. You do not need to. Names belong to the observer. This intelligence does not require naming to function. It only requires space, and space appears the moment you stop occupying the role of the one who must watch. This is why surrender cannot be forced. Any force recreates the observer. Surrender appears when force ends, when effort ends, when the need to manage awareness dissolves. And this can happen in a breath, in a pause, in the middle of a sentence. Nothing special needs to occur. Just this: see the one who is watching and do not become it. That is all. From there, everything else aligns on its own. Not because you made it happen, but because you finally stopped standing in the way. When the observer dissolves, life does not become vague. It becomes precise, not sharper in a mental way, clearer in a living way. There is no loss of direction. There is no confusion. What disappears is the noise of supervision. You are no longer watching life to see if it is going the right way. You are moving with it. This is the destination, not a place you arrive at. A way life carries itself when you stop standing apart. Nothing mystical appears. Nothing dramatic announces itself. There is simply a sense that things are being handled without force, handled without fear, handled without constant checking. You do not feel guided by signs. You feel guided by alignment. Choices feel obvious without being loud. Next steps reveal themselves without pressure. You are not guessing anymore. You are not calculating the future. You are responding to what is here, and what is here feels organized. This is the quiet truth. When the observer steps aside, intelligence does not disappear. It becomes intimate, not something above you, not something outside you, something moving through every detail. This is why life feels led instead of pushed. You still encounter uncertainty. You still face change. You still meet moments you cannot predict, but they do not destabilize you. You meet them without bracing, without stepping back to manage. There is a confidence that does not come from certainty, a steadiness that does not come from control. It comes from being supported, not emotionally supported, structurally supported, as if the ground underneath experience is solid again. This is the clarity people search for through effort, through discipline, through endless refinement. But clarity does not come from trying harder. It comes from no longer trying to be the one in charge. This is why the observer was never the destination. It was the final checkpoint before trust. And trust here is not belief. It is permission. Permission for life to organize itself. Permission for intelligence to function without supervision. This intelligence does not speak in words. It does not announce plans. It moves. You recognize it in timing, in how things line up without manipulation, in how conversations unfold without strategy. You stop forcing outcomes, and outcomes arrive with less resistance. You stop protecting an image of yourself, and authenticity becomes effortless. You stop proving awareness, and awareness becomes invisible. This is why nothing about this state wants attention. There is no need to talk about it, no need to explain it. It feels complete without commentary. And that is how, the observer is no longer running the show, because the observer always wants recognition. Here, recognition fades. What remains is participation. You are part of life instead of standing next to it. And something else becomes obvious. This was never far away. It was never hidden. It was simply covered by effort. The effort to stay aware, the effort to stay correct, the effort to stay in control. When effort drops, what remains is guidance. Not guidance that tells you what to do, guidance that moves you where you belong. This is where the idea of God finally settles into reality, not as belief, not as doctrine, as function. God not as someone who directs from above, but as the intelligence that carries everything when nothing interferes. You do not worship this. You do not argue with it. You live inside it. And living inside it feels ordinary. You still wake up, still work, still interact, but you are no longer trying to hold everything together. You are no longer asking, am I doing this right? Life answers before the question finishes forming. This is the end of seeking, not because you found something special, but because there is nothing left to chase. You are where movement originates, not because you control it, because you stopped blocking it. If you are still here, something in you already recognizes this, not intellectually, viscerally, a sense of familiarity, a quiet yes. You have felt moments like this before, moments where effort vanished, moments where action flowed, moments where you did not feel watched from inside. Those moments were not accidents. They were signals that this way of being is natural, that the observer was temporary, that life knows how to lead itself. You do not need to hold on to this message. You do not need to remember every word. Recognition does not require memory. It settles where it belongs. And now, there is only one invitation: not to follow, not to subscribe, not to agree, just to notice. If the silence underneath these words feels familiar, if the stillness feels known, if something in you softened while listening, that is enough. You do not need to explain it. You do not need to name it. You do not need to tell anyone. But if you want to leave a signal, not for me, not for the channel, for yourself, leave it quietly. Not as proof, not as belief, as recognition, because you are not alone in sensing this, and you never were. When the observer dissolves, life does not fade. It becomes guided, and the guidance was always here,